Okay, so this is like a late night video because just why not? So, in yesterday's video for Year of the Fire Horse, I talked a bit about some of the houses that bring up the element of fire. And the first house is a very pivotal house in the fact that in Hellenistic astrology, Aries is the sign that rules over this house. Mars is the planet that rules over the first house. They're both known to be very fiery, red hot energies. Mars is a fairly fast moving planet, not as quick as Mercury, or even Venus, but it still has those elements of Aries. Aries, if you know an Aries in your life, there's some element of them that is very cardinal, very quick, and very expressive as well. So the first house also has to do with some of those things that I mentioned, and I just wanted to do a little mini deep dive to talk a bit about it more and what it means in astrology in general. So I think I love talking about just like the etymology of words in general, what house means and where it comes from. It has a lot of different kind of like old English, old Dutch, old Germanic roots. Of course most of us know it as being like a shelter, building, designed to be used as residence, and Proto-Germanic etymological terms is also tied to this like Old Norse, hus, Dutch huis, German Haus, haus. It's of unknown origin in those terms, but it is likely connected to be to the root of hide, like to conceal. And then in Gothic only, in Godhus, it means temple. So literally God house is the usual word for house. In an astrological sense, it describes, for the way I see it, is this container for things that are active within it, from people to pets, planets, gods, and goddesses. The house system in astrology provides this depth to a chart, and it reveals characteristics that you might have already felt were present given which planets or points reside in there. With that being said, let's jump a bit more into it. So, oh Lord. Oh. I guess I already had all of this stuff done. I was like, dang, girl, I didn't know you wrote all this. Okay. So the first house signifies self and personality. You have that core self, how you express yourself. It provides insights into your ego, which is kind of like your lust for life and your drive for life. How you think about yourself, how you see the world as well. Tendencies that are second nature, determination, and the visible aspects of your character. Rising sign and appearance in Western whole sign house astrology, which is which is the system that I use astrology through. And the rising sign is located, also known as the ascendant, in the first house. It always will reside in the first house in whole sign house astrology, and this is what further highlights those significations of the self and the personality that the first house is aligned with. As the rising sign is astrology, it's not a planet but an astrological point. So it kind of, the most action you're going to get through there is like the planets that are moving through the sign that your ascendant is in. You calculate your ascendant by knowing what time you're born. If you don't know what time you're born, then you go through a process called rectification. You can hire an astrologer to do that, or you can do that on your own by reverse engineering your chart through different kind of cosmological markers that would identify major things in the chart to help locate that. The first house in Hellenistic astrology, it is the hour marker. Speaking of hour markers, it is the place that rises over the eastern horizon at the moment of birth, and it sets the orientation for the entire chart because it anchors the 12 places or topoi. I've also referred to the first house as being like the helm of a ship. It's steering the ship, it's leading the ship. It's the first thing that people see, but it's also that the compass, really. So core topics involved in these traditional significations are life and vitality, not just personally, but the fact of being alive, the person's overall constitution, and the strength to persist through challenges. And keep thinking about what this means in the Fire Horse year, because the energy this year just is very alive. The ideas are alive, the joy's alive, it's that aliveness is really that amplification for sure. That amplification is a sign of vitality for sure, no matter what that vitality is showing up as. But yes, it really is that. The first house also has core topics of the physical body and embodiment, the physical form, temperament, health baseline, and how the body carries the life story, especially thinking in Western whole sign house astrology, its connection with the ascendant, the date, the time that you were actually born, that you actually made it to this physical plane, and how that, really does set a foundation for what your physical form will be like and how the body carries the life story from that moment on. It also characterizes self-direction and agency. The first house signifies the native as an actor in life, signifying that you have a role to play, and whether you have a script or whether you are kind of winging it, maybe you're weaving in both, you're nonetheless taking that initiative and self-propulsion, and through this you can meet the circumstances of that self-direction and that agency. Another core topic with the first house is your name and your identity and your reputation as the one who is seen. When I mentioned the helm, it's like it's the first thing that people see when facing a ship head on. It's the first is what enters the world, and at the beginning, and it really often describes the quote-unquote headline of how a person is recognized in the world. And it's of course all of the houses are very powerful in their own right, but the first house is characteristically powerful in the sense that It's angular, so it is a pivot of the chart. In many Hellenistic texts, the angles are places where things become concrete, visible, and are able to act upon them. Like you're able to run and bounce. Like you can't really walk on water, but you can walk on a solid concrete surface. Planets in the first tend to have a louder effect in the native's chart because they are in a position to manifest a bit quicker because they have that foundation of being in an angular chart. Very concrete, very visible. Yeah. The planetary condition in the first, so some things to look at when interpreting a planet in the first house from a Hellenistic perspective. We would focus on things like the sect, domicile, exaltation, debilitation, speed, visibility, and phase, and also aspects to the ascendant and its ruler. So just to quickly move through these, sect is the planet in sect or out of sect, which means day versus night chart. This modifies how constructive or stressful the planet's expression may potentially feel. So let's say if you were born in a day chart, it would be helpful to look in, and you had Mars in the first house, it would be helpful to look at the characteristics of Mars in a day chart or in a planet Mars insect, to see what that relationship would be like, especially with your ascendant as well. So moving on to domicile, exaltation, and debility. A planet in its own sign or exaltation can describe a body and identity that knows how to be itself. A planet in detriment or fall can indicate friction, reinvention, or a life of learning to inhabit the self differently. Whereas evaluating speed, visibility, and phase, speed and visibility being some key themes that we talked about with the Fire Horse year, especially for planets like Mercury, Venus, and Mars, those planets that I mentioned earlier that move a bit quicker. These themes or these planetary conditions can refine how loudly or urgently or subtly the planet shows up in the personality and physical presentation. So I know that I have my Mercury, Venus, and Mars. When I first started rectifying my chart, they were all in the same house, and I'm like, what is this? Is this even making sense? Is it? But I kept looking, and it really made sense. Oh my gosh, okay. I love to chat. My Venus would potentially be in Gemini when I first rectified my chart after studying it for years. And it really checked out, especially with Mars. I've been an athlete all my life. I stopped after a certain time, but, from a young age to the age of 18, I was a rigorous athlete, and I had Mars in my first house. And if you can go even further into of course the aspects, but also once you get into degree theory and the relationship that those planets have to other planets in the chart, will be even bigger indicators at how that planet shows up for you, especially, and also what you get to pick and choose. I don't rewatch my cosmological DNA video because that video was so good. It's like nothing is ever too set in stone. Like, there's this like battle between fate and fortune when it comes to astrology, and it's this beautiful war of kind of learning how to take control of your own life and take accountability for things that have happened in your life and things that you would like to happen in your life as well. So being able to activate aspects of your chart that you would like to see activated, to see, you get a little glimpse from some of the themes, like, oh, this is okay, this is how good life can be. Let's see how much better it can get if I really embody this archetype. And then, like I mentioned before, aspects to the ascendant and its ruler. So in the first house, the ruler of the chart, especially of course based off of the sign of the ascendant, but in whole sign planets that tightly aspect the ascendant degree can become extremely descriptive, even if they are not in the first house sign. So like I mentioned, my Mercury, Venus, and Mars were very close to my ascendant. And that checked out. All of those characteristics were very near and dear to my heart. And it's an evolution of life. It's not going to be one and the same. You stop doing one thing and then another aspect of that planet or ascendant activates and you embody a new archetype. That's kind of been my experience, and that life is just going to send you down another path for you to follow, and it gets to be fun. So the ascendant is a nice storyteller for the first house, for sure, especially in Hellenistic practice. The ruler of the ascendant is one of the most important significations sometimes for how you want your life to go. There's so much archetypal information in astrology. It's never just one and done. Keep searching, and also I'll keep coming out with more information of how different cultures and different timelines have viewed the first house or have viewed certain planets. And you can get more archetypal evidence that you might want to embody, that you might want to activate in your life, so that you can get to your best self and your happiest self and your most successful self, for sure. The house placement can describe where the self, quote unquote, goes in order to become fully expressed, which is a bit different for the whole sign house astrology. It'll always be in the first house, so that's pretty easy. And its condition, like we mentioned before, is it debilitated? Is it exalted? Is it in domicile? What's the speed or the visibility or the phase of it at the time of your birth or even now? What aspects are to it? Is it a day or a night chart? Things like that. So, whoopsie daisy. So key transits, especially for year of the fire horse to look out to, would be Mars and Saturn. I think we mentioned discipline in yesterday's video. So looking at Saturn and Mars for that decisive energy, cutting off all other options in order to get to that next quick move for your growth. So in terms of growth and protection, we also want to be looking at the planet Jupiter, if it is the ruler of your ascendant, the ruler of your first house, or if the planets or ascendant in your first house have any connections to the planet Jupiter. And of course the transits as well. I think Jupiter is in Cancer still, and it's retrograde in Cancer currently. So there's that. So just to tie things up in a somewhat bow, the first house and the year of the horse, it's tricky to connect them to, and especially when I'm talking so much about Hellenistic astrology. Like, nonetheless, we'll still find those connections, even though it's Hellenistic and Chinese astrology. It seems very different, but nonetheless, you have some elemental things and broad themes to go off of. I think it's really, really cool that we get to witness this 60-year cycle, and also happy Lunar New Year as well. I should have started off saying that, but I love harnessing a certain energy and alchemizing it to work in my favor, so I think it's really beautiful. I just love a good ritual, and that to me is the joy of Lunar New Year. Been seeing a lot of people that just show me all of their rituals that they do with their family, so it's been very beautiful to see that tradition continuing. So those shared symbolic themes that really tie into yesterday's video are the horse itself, and the motion, the independence, and also it's very tribal as well, which is a very human thing, but also something very, very natural to horses, I would say. I mean, I don't really know any of them that are alone in their evolutionary history. They've always been with their tribe. I think people I've never envisioned horses as being independent. Maybe I need to look into it a little bit more, but they wouldn't have survived this long as a species if they were not together in some way. So, motion, speed, instinct, and the drive to act, but also to be patient, to be playful. I spent a lot of time around horses. I think I also mentioned that in the last video. I spent a lot of time around horses when I was younger. They're very playful. They're very joyous, very childlike. They're also very smart. Like, all of the things, they're so freaking intelligent. So freaking intelligent. And the thing is that it's encoded in them. You know, anything that has them acting outside of their nature, something was done to them, and they had to work through it if they were gracious enough to be in an environment where they could be, kind of heal from that. And I think that that's a key lesson to take away for sure. And so you'll get more activations in these things the more you clear out what is no longer serving you. The last year was the year of the snake. We're done shedding. Shed the last of the things now. Okay? Shed the last of the things now. And then the motion and the speed and the instinct and the drive to act, it will come through with a lot more clarity. Fire is another symbolic theme, that vitality, the courage, the visibility, the risk, the leadership, and the passion. And the first house itself, the embodied self, initiative, how you enter life, and what you lead with, the helm. What is going to be the helm of the ship that you're steering for this new lunar year. What kind of person do you want to activate? Personification for being bold and self-directed and fast-moving, and also finding ways to do that within a group as well. For sure. Who says we have to do this alone? And that these life paths kind of ask for a sense of your calling. It might be calling you to your calling, kind of drawn to it like a moth to a flame. Are you being led down a path of exploration and curiosity and learning more? Enjoying that impulse and the risk that's involved with just going down that path and seeing what you find out. And yeah, what else? What are some last things? I think one thing that I wanted to end with were some questions. Just some reflective prompts. And some of these prompts are really funny. I don't know what I was thinking. One of them says, where do I need patience, strategy, and pacing? I would keep the strategy, the pacing, take away the patience, keep the drive and the impatience a little bit, and it will naturally get slowed in a good way through the strategy and the pacing. So keep the impatience, keep the drive, keep the curiosity, keep the passion, and then funnel that through the strategy and the pacing, and it can still be fast. Where does my chart show speed, independence, and leadership? So looking at the first house, the 10th house, and where any fire elements are in your chart. And then how do you ride the fire without letting it run me? How do we do this without getting burnt out? Journaling on that. What things are you still holding on to that you should be shedding? Sometimes we feel burnt out because we're holding on to extra shit that we don't need to be holding on to. Could be that. Those are some things to journal on and just kind of, or reflect on, to get a bit more insight on how to just clear the mainframe for how you might like to show up for this year. So that was it, and I'm glad I came on to talk. I'm going to upload this. I really appreciate you guys for being here and for listening and for liking and subscribing and for being a part of my community, whether it's online or in person. Lots more fun to come, and I will see you guys in the next one. Good night and happy Lunar New Year to anybody celebrating. And yeah, I hope you have a fabulous, fabulous New Year.